Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorosh. I am here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold after another 3-3 week, a combo of some great baseball and some absolutely unwatchable, terrible, get steamrolled and not get a hit for 3-day baseball, followed by an 8-run inning yesterday. So Evan Petzold, somehow explain this to me. It's like being on a roller coaster, and the terrible just seems to overwhelm the good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, another 3-3 week, win the first two, then you lose 3 in a row, and then you win Sunday's game. Outscored 24-5 in the 3-game losing streak from Wednesday through Sunday. That was games on Wednesday, off day Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday, the 3 losses. And then again, like you said, win 10-2 to snap the losing streak with Tarek Skubal on the mound thanks to an 8-run 5th inning from the offense. It's bizarre, but that's kind of how the Tigers have been all year. Is it's a lot of really bad and then, you know, some quick spurts of some good things. And I think their offense is kind of built to do that just because, you know, their offense does have guys that move the ball forward. They do practice play discipline. Like they draw some walks. Like look at Jahan coming up and, you know, already drawn 4 walks. And, you know, what he's been able to do is kind of part of what their offensive identity is trying to be. I'm not saying it always is, but that's what they want to be. And so when they face wild pitchers who are ineffective, they do a good job of laying off pitches, getting on base, and moving the ball forward. The problem is when they face anybody with any competence, it's just an utter train wreck. So that's how it's been for the Tigers. And that's how you kind of get to these 3-3 weeks that we've been seeing over and over and over again. And that's just where this team is at right now. That's where the team is at. I thought it was, you know, good of them to come out and they won the first 2 games that they played in Texas, but it was a 2-1 win and then a 3-1 win. And then they lost 9-1. So the offense wasn't scoring in Texas. The offense also really wasn't scoring coming home and playing against the Brewers. They lost the first game 10-0, and then they lost 5-4. And then obviously the 10-2 win on Sunday with the 8-run inning. That makes a huge difference. But the offense still going through so much up and down, and more down than up. It's concerning.
Well, look, I think you and I are adult enough to say good teams don't lose 24-5 over a 3-day period. I mean, it's just utter sadness in some ways. And to go over a 3-game period to get 5 hits over 2 days and then 5 hits in the 3rd game, 4 of which are in the first 3 innings and 1 is in the last 6 innings, it's, I think, speaks a lot to the nature of the lineup, which is just overwhelmed by a lot of guys who've been promoted from Toledo that we have questions about. You mentioned Jahan. Yeah, he's drawn a few walks. He's hit a homer. He's also had hits in 2 of the 6 games he's played. Hasn't looked particularly dangerous or really very good. His performance in the outfield the other day, I think my comment was, Braden Michael Gorosh, when we sit on the front steps and blow bubbles together, and he chases a few of them, it reminded me a lot of Justin Henry Rouleau chasing a couple fly balls and a ball in the gap the other day. It was some frightening stuff. So it's not major league caliber defense. And I think the Tigers had some concerns about him. I don't want to get too deep into it. And I think he's essentially validated every single concern they had.
Well, Mark, that's why it took him 800 plate appearances to get here, right? I mean, again, 800 plate appearances in AAA to get his call up because the defense is just no good. He's going to spend a lot of time as the designated hitter. We'll see what happens if and when Kerry Carpenter comes back. But look, like if you're the Tigers right now, I mean, again, I know it's early. I understand that we haven't even gotten to the All-Star break yet, but you look at the American League Central standings, Tigers are 10.5 games back. Like Cleveland is 42-22. And then you got Kansas City at 39-27, Minnesota at 34-31. And then obviously the
better.
And the Tigers obviously at 32-33. I really like what I've seen from Cleveland. I love what I've seen from Kansas City. If you're the Tigers and you're staring up at Cleveland and you're 10.5 back at this point, I mean, there's reason to be concerned, especially because like the Tigers haven't done a whole lot. If you really take a peek at like what they've done since their 5-0 start, like it hasn't been great. Like it's not like the Tigers have been able to be, you know, super locked in, winning all these games. Like they've had a losing record since their 5-0 start to this season. When you look at it and you stretch it all the way out, you take them even month by month if you want, right? I mean, they were 3-0 in March, they were 14-13 in April, and then 11-16 in May, and then 4-4 in June with a -7 run differential in June so far. So those are signs of concerns for me if you're talking about a team that has aspirations to be in the postseason. Now, if you're talking about a team that just wants to finish 500 and that's all good, then you know what? Great. They're doing exactly what they should be doing because the Tigers are 32-33. But if this team has postseason aspirations, they're not doing enough. Red flags, should be concerned. That's where I'm at when I evaluate this team right now. But if they just want to be 500, then this is a great season so far.
All right. Two real quick things. One, the Tigers are playing 70-74 win baseball. And really, that's pretty much the nature of the competency level of the baseball team. If you remove Tarek Skubal from the Detroit Tigers, they're one of the 6 worst teams in baseball right now. And I think it would be unfair to call them anything else. Okay? The AL Central's quite good this year. I mean, don't sleep on the Minnesota Twins. You just got Royce Lewis back. They're a good baseball team. Pablo Lopez is terrible right now. He is not going to be terrible forever. So I want to ask you a question before we jump into the big two. How much different are the Tigers without Kerry Carpenter?
It's interesting, man. I mean, they're a much different team, a much different team. And a lot of that is because of what Kerry Carpenter brings, like as a whole, as a guy who's going to bat every day against right-handed pitchers. Like it's completely different without Kerry Carpenter. And you start to look at like what the Tigers core was supposed to be. And, you even think about like walking into the clubhouse every day and you look at that line of players and it's Riley Green right when you walk in the door, locker next to him, Spencer Torkelson. After that, Parker Meadows. After that, Kerry Carpenter. And of those 4 guys, the only one that's around and in the lineup every day right now is Riley Green. That's it. And obviously Colt Keith, he has his own spot, close to those guys, but not directly in that line. I know Colt Keith is a big part of their future too. But the point is that without Kerry Carpenter, they don't really have much offense. Like you go back and you look at what they did in Texas, like not a whole lot. Like the only time that the Tigers are good offensively, it seems, is when they have a pitcher who's basically wild and they have a decent game plan. They do a good job of sticking to the game plan sometimes. They can draw walks, but that's kind of all that they are without Kerry Carpenter. Like go look at what Kerry Carpenter did against right-handed pitchers. I mean, it's incredible. It is just incredible. Okay. 1.004 OPS against right-handed pitchers. At the time of his injury, that was like 4th or 5th in the big leagues among players with at least 140 plate appearances in those situations against right-handed pitchers, trailing only Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Kyle Tucker, Juan Soto. So like when you're in that group of players, it's like pulling any 3-4 hitter out of anybody's lineup. That's how Kerry Carpenter was performing against right-handed pitchers. And now the Tigers have no Kerry Carpenter. Torkelson is off doing his thing in AAA Toledo. It's good to see a little bit of success. I'm sure that's good for him, but it's going to be a while. It's going to be a minute. Riley Green rides that wave of inconsistent performance. The only one that was performing consistently against right-handed pitchers is Kerry Carpenter, and he's gone.
Well, I remember in late August of 2022, there was a press conference, and 3 things stood out to me in that press conference that I liked hearing, encouraged me. They were dominating the strike zone, playing clean, and calculated risk. So I ask you about dominating the strike zone. How are the Tigers hitting the baseball when they get either challenge pitches or meatball pitches, which are pretty much the same thing, in the middle of the strike zone? How's their walk rate, aside from Riley Green and Mark Canha? And let's be really blunt about it. During the last 5 weeks, Riley Green's walk rate is down to about a little over 7%. So his high walk rate is a function of the first 5 weeks of the season, not the last 5 weeks. And, playing clean, my goodness. I mean, it looked like a circus out there the past few days. You watch the play where, Milwaukee took so many extra bases in the first 2 games. I think they actually needed to call a timeout to get some oxygen from how much they were running on what was, pretty much JV level quality baseball. So You tell me, as far as calculated risk and trades, where's one of those?
Yeah, I don't really know what Scott Harris would tell you if you asked him that question, because if you take a peek at where the Tigers are at offensively, 23rd in baseball with a 7.8% walk rate. You want to go look at strikeout rate? Not great either. 23.5% strikeout rate. That's 22nd in baseball. So they're in the bottom half in baseball in both walks and strikeouts on offense. Now, I understand that pitching has done a better job of dominating the strikes. I understand there's two sides of the coin, but if we're talking about offense, where this team lacks, Tigers in the bottom half of baseball in walks and strikeouts. Now, it's not as bad as it was in 2021 or 2022, and the Tigers ranked like 30th in baseball in those categories. I get it. So you can call it progress if you want, but it's not enough progress. It is not enough progress. It just isn't. It's just not. It's just not. Because you know who doesn't strike out? Kansas City doesn't strike out. Cleveland doesn't strike out. You know who draws walks at a high clip? The New York Yankees draw walks at a high clip. So do the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Phillies. Like, those are teams that draw walks at a high clip. They get on base. You even want to talk about the American League Central? Cleveland, 10th in baseball when it comes to drawing walks. So the Tigers aren't there yet, either drawing walks on offense or limiting strikeouts. That's a reason to be concerned, but we need to get into question one of the big two, Mark.
All right, question one of the big two. Let's get into it. Scott Harris went on MLB Network to talk about the Tigers with Brian Kenny. What do we think about what he said regarding spending and the concept of building a core?
Let's go right to the audio. Robin Shan, our producer, let's cut to it.
Yeah, I mean, from the moment I got here, Chris Ilitch said that we would have the resources we need to build a really competitive club, and to build a club that can sustain winning over a long period of time. We're not quite there yet as far as, spending at that level, because we need to build the foundation of this team to put us in a position to supplement it with, some free agent signings in the upcoming winters. I have confidence that the resources will be here. The Ilitch family has always supported the Tigers, and they are ready and eager to do it. And I'm actually sitting in the world headquarters for Little Caesars right now, because we have scouting meetings across the street at Little Caesars, and I'm confident that the resources will be there. We just have to develop the core that we're going to spend around, and we also have to target the players in upcoming winters that can really help us.
So that's Scott Harris on MLB Network talking with Brian Kenny, in studio analyst. He does a great job. I thought he asked some really good questions. And the question there that, led to that response was Tigers payroll ranks 23rd in the 2024 season. It's $106.5 million, nearly $60 million lower than the average of all 30 teams. The Tigers ranked 20th in payroll last season at $121.5 million. So going from $121.5 to $106.5. The question being, like, are the Tigers ever going to spend? And that's the way that Scott Harris answered it was, again, speaking from the Little Caesars world headquarters, he believes that spending is going to be there. Like, they're going to be able to spend when the time is right, once they build the core. The point of the answer, though, was that the core has not been built yet. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from what he had said when he was talking on MLB Network. And core is not built yet, but core needs to be built before Chris Ilitch is going to come out and spend to kind of boost the team. What are your takeaways, Mark?
Well, look, I'm far less concerned about spending money than most of the fan base is. I'm not a huge believer in the necessity to spend money to be good. I think what's paramount about being good is talent evaluation. So talent evaluation is all about making good trades, signing clever free agents, obviously drafting well. But if you're drafting well and you're drafting high school players, it usually means that your successor in the job is going to benefit from drafting high school players. Let's be blunt about it. When I listened to that couple of minutes of Scott Harris talk to Brian Kenny, I'm 68 years old. I've been the boss. I've been the employee. I've sat in the boss's chair looking at people that were underperforming after a period of time of being either my employee or working for me when somebody else was paying me to be the boss. And I've been somebody that at various times in his career maybe wasn't doing the best job, and I had people looking at me expecting more. And what I heard looking at and listening to Scott Harris was a guy that seemed to know that things weren't going great. And he's trying to explain why they're not going great. And he sounds a little nervous about it. Lots of people are good about understanding they're underperforming, and they pick their performance up and go on to have great careers at that particular profession, but not really a high percentage of them. And when I equate what I was listening to and seeing in that discussion, I don't really have a lot of hope for Scott Harris, to be honest with you. He looked pretty nervous, and he looked like he was feeling the heat, and he should, because there's never been a defined timeline from Scott Harris about how long it's going to take to build his team. You're two years into it. All his core pieces, he had 2 1-1 pieces he inherited, Spencer Torkelson and Casey Mize. He had Riley Green, once thought to be one of the budding stars in baseball. He had Kerry Carpenter, who has now been injured, and he has Tarek Skubal, who will likely be the AL Cy Young winner. So it's not like he didn't have some core players in what's transpired. So, what's he added? What's he drafted that's helped him so far? Has he made any trades that have supplemented the team? Free agents? What's he added at the margins? You tell me, Evan Petzold, what were your 2 cents about this whole thing? Because he just looked like a really nervous, double talking, trying to explain why he didn't spend money kind of guy. And at the end of the day, just hasn't improved the team very much.
Well, I just think everybody saw like an open window to contend and to make a push for the playoffs when you look at the American League Central and how poor of a division it was last year across the board. When sure, like there were some teams that were competitive, but they were competitive in a much different way than, let's say, like, the National League West. So I think when people saw that, they thought, okay, the Tigers are going to have an opportunity here. And to see them fall behind in that pack so early is disappointing. When I hear Scott Harris talk, I wonder, are they close to completing the foundation? It's unclear to me if the Tigers are close to completing that foundation, to finding, that core that they're looking for. And therefore, like, I have no idea if the Tigers are even close to spending big, like Harris suggests will happen at some point. Because if the core is not built and the foundation is not there yet, it's going to be a minute. It's going to be a while, actually. So when you talk about former number 1 overall pick, Spencer Torkelson, Casey Mize, they're not performing like franchise cornerstone players. Riley Green is a streaky hitter, 3rd year in a row. We've seen this from him. Colt Keith, I know it's a very club-friendly contract, so that's a good thing. But at the same time, like, he's starting to settle in, but he's still going through his ups and downs. Parker Meadows already been sent back to AAA Toledo. We know about that. Torkelson, he's back too. And yes, Kerry Carpenter has been a steady stud pre-back injury. I mean, the lumbar spine stress fracture, that doesn't sound great. And Reese Olson's been good until his last 2 outings. I get that. And Tarek Skubal, you're right, absolutely dominant. But Tarek Skubal is going to become a free agent after the 2026 season. So I've mentioned this many times. You have 2 more years of Tarek Skubal. If the window is not open, if the foundation is not here now, if the foundation is not here right now, when is the foundation going to be here? When is the core going to be here? Because if the core isn't Torkelson, Mize, Green, Meadows, Skubal, Carpenter, Olson, Keith, if that is not the core, that is not the entire core, then when is the core arriving? Is the core Colt Keith, a more veteran Riley Green, a more veteran Reese Olson, Jackson Jobe, Josue Brasino? Like, is that, Kevin McGonigal, like, is that the true core? Those are players that were drafted by Scott Harris. Remember, none of the players that I had mentioned, Torkelson, Mize, Green, Keith, Meadows, Skubal, Olson, Carpenter, those guys were not drafted by Scott Harris. So when Scott Harris looks at what is his core, when he asks himself, when he looks in the mirror and says, who's my core? Who are my guys? Well, his guys are Max Clark, Kevin McGonigal, and the dudes down in Low A Lakeland right now. So that's why on our last episode, I went on the long rant questioning 2026, 2027. Is that more realistic? I just think it's like this scary reality that we have to brace for, because there has been no timeline. There has been no timeline. There's been no information given about when the Tigers actually plan to be good. Okay, you saw an opportunity because of the Central and the weak American League Central and the opportunity to strike, but that hasn't shaken out. not for the Tigers. So I even go back to, again, when Scott Harris had his opening press conference, it was September 20th, 2022. That's when he had his press conference. The Tigers fired Al Avila. They hired Harris, made it official by having him, at Comerica Park for a big event. And let's just go back to the vision, right? I want to present the vision because the vision is important. He gave really like 3 pillars. 1, the Tigers must acquire, develop, and retain young players, especially over the next few years. 2, the Tigers must get the most out of the players at all levels of the organization by creating a culture of development. 3, the strike zone influences everything on the field. And those are the 3 main concepts of his vision. And I still haven't had a timeline yet. I still have not heard a timeline of when the Tigers plan to really be good. When is the core going to be there? When are we going to be able to supplement the core? And that's why I worry that maybe it's 2026. Maybe it's 2027. Maybe we got a few more years of losing.
Well, in 2023, the Cleveland Indians won 74 games. In 2023, I think the KC Royals won 56 games. So, yes, KC has the favorite for the MVP this year, Bobby Witt Jr., who is having a not only career year, but a generational year. And, I just wonder what exactly Scott Harris is doing to build a good baseball team. He's demonstrated absolutely zero skills to me that tell me that he's able to execute the little bit he shared about his plan. When I look at the players he's acquired, if you enjoyed watching the Milwaukee Brewers the last 3 days and their style of baseball that has been winning baseball for the last 6 years, multiple division titles, lost, I think I've gone over this. They've lost 2 closers. They lost a generational manager. They lost a Cy Young caliber starter. They lost another really, really good starter. That's just to begin. All those players are gone from their team because they didn't want to pay them or they traded them or for whatever reason. Those are certain money concerns. At the same time, they also donated one of the Tigers' supposedly best hitters in Mark Canha. They literally handed him to the Detroit Tigers for very little, if any, return. He could not play for the Milwaukee Brewers. They were not spending $11 million on Mark Canha. He is a core player in 2024 for the Detroit Tigers. So I ask you, what the hell is going on now? I mean, we're 2 years into it. Who's the core players? Who's been improved by this particular regime? Are there issues at the major league level from a hitting standpoint? And it's easy to point your finger at the hitting staff, but something's going on and guys aren't getting better. And, it's a problem. I'm a huge AJ Hinch guy, but in some small respects, some of this is on AJ. I mean, the style of play, the sloppiness on defense. Yes, it's a lot of young players. Yes, they're running a tryout camp now. Yes, they've had a few injuries. But look, at the same time, their bullpen is just ass right now. It's terrible. You have 1.5 good bullpen pieces, and you never know what you're going to get from the other 6 guys. You don't. Sometimes they're unbelievable. Sometimes they're not. Okay? Your starting rotation, look, outside of Tarek Skubal, what are you getting? Who's shutting things down? I mean, Flaherty, last 6 weeks, unbelievable. Mark Gorash, not a huge Jack Flaherty guy before these last 6 weeks, but I have to tip my hat to the guy because performance always talks. But he's on a $14 million contract that expires at the end of the season, and I promise you they will be taking things in a Dutch auction in the next 5 weeks to see what they can get for him. And how many good trades has Scott Harris made in his career? And if you want to tell me about a second baseman in Double-A that you have prospects for, my answer to you is they have 4 second basemen in the minor leagues that are pretty good. And so far, how's the transition of by far their best hitting prospect been in 2024? Nobody didn't love Colt Keith. It's hard to hit in the major leagues and make the transition from the minor leagues. So if you're going to give me the discussion about how the top of their draft is going to perform, I'm going to tell you, you're going to probably visit Mark Gorash in the cemetery because I'm going to be so old, I'm going to be dead. The bottom line is they got problems. And to try to spackle them over with a bunch of GM speak is, not really treating the fans of the Detroit Tigers fairly. So I want to see Scott Harris meet with the beat writers, guys like Evan Petzold, guys that ask tough questions, and be honest and be upfront and discuss the failures, discuss what he's planning on doing about it, not hide in his office, not tell me he's having scouting meetings across the street at LCA while they cater in a few chicken tenders. It's enough of this nonsense. We did 7 years of incompetent general manager activities. It's about time somebody was accountable for something.
I just want a timeline, Mark. I just want a timeline. I think the fans deserve that too, because if the timeline is 2026 or 2027, and that's the target year, and that's when you're really looking at building things up again, I think the fans deserve to know that. I think the fans deserve to brace for that, and because of what they've been through, right? Like, I think you can get behind something like that if you're upfront and you're honest about it, and you come out and you say, hey, look, if we squeak in the next 2-3 years, we make it to the postseason, as a wild card team, that's great. That would be overachieving for us. Our plan is to really have this thing built up, have it strong, have it ready to go by 2026, 2027. Sure, inherited some pieces, but also pretty dysfunctional organization up and down when you talk about, kind of the way that the organization worked in and out of itself, and, the way that scouting was not aligned with player development. Like, there were a lot of things wrong with the organization that Scott Harris has fixed. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. But at the same time, if the plan isn't to win right now, like, let's just be honest about it. Let's just be real with people about it. Like, let's not hide behind, no non-answers. Really, that's what it comes down to. Because you're right. Like, when you look up and down the board, like, there's Tarek Skubal and Jack Flaherty. They're going to trade him. Like, I don't want to run through the whole roster. I think it's kind of pointless. But, like, there's a couple pieces, and there's really one piece, and it's Tarek Skubal. And that's the piece. And that piece is going to be gone after the 2026 season, because I don't see the Tigers re-signing him for injury concern reasons. I'm not sure if they're going to trade him. I know that's been a big conversation, especially on like talk radio and stuff like that. I have no idea if they're going to try to move him now as opposed to moving him later. But the point is I don't see the Tigers re-signing Tarek Skubal, both because I think there are some injury concerns there long-term that the Tigers are concerned about, that haven't really been discussed a ton, but I think there are some underlying factors there. And then also too, like, Tarek Skubal's probably looking at himself as like, hey, look, like, I'm going to get MVP votes this year. Like, let's get the free agency ASAP and bag as much money as possible, because he's, put himself in a position to do that. So aside from Tarek Skubal, like, what do the Tigers really have? Not a whole lot. You go look at their bullpen. You talk about, how bad the bullpen has been. Nobody misses bats in the bullpen. Their number one swing and miss guy, Alex Lang, is in AAA Toledo. Their number two guy, Alex Fido, he's now injured. So they don't really have anybody in the bullpen that's missing bats. That's a problem. Starting rotation, yes, you have Skubal and you have Flaherty, but again, Skubal, yes, he's your horse. Flaherty is going to be gone by the trade deadline. And then you have Reese Olson, who still riding that wave, like, again, so good for so long. He was kind of bound to regress a little bit at some point, I think, just because of how good he was. But then after that, like, what do you really have? Like, what's Casey Mize? Like, not very good. What's Matt Manning? Not very good. So again, like, what do the Tigers really have? Like, seriously though, what do they really have from a pitching standpoint? And then you flip it over and you want to take a peek at, what they have on the hitting side of the ball. And yes, I have faith in Colt Keith to be able to be a good player, but like Riley Green, yes, he's good. Yes, he has 11 homers, but at the same time, it's up and down, up and down. He rides that wave. I think Riley Green is a future cornerstone. I think he's here for his entire contract. I think he's going to be really good. And I think he already is really good. But like, aside from Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, like, there's not a whole lot, man. There just really isn't a whole lot. And that's frustrating. I'm sure, we're going to see Colt Keith join that group, and, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Colt Keith, that can be a more veteran core. And by veteran core, I mean, they could be maybe in years, 4, 5, and 6 of their contracts when, Max Clark is making his arrival. But is that the timeline? That's kind of my concern. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. Like, I kind of don't really have much more to say other than it's about time to get a timeline. I think fans deserve to know.
All right. It's time to take a break. I'm going to go take a drink of coffee, take 2 Advil, and punch a wall. We'll be back in a minute. All right. We're back. Question 2, the big 2. Scott Harris on the same MLB Network discussion with Brian Kenny discussed Javier Báez. He specifically asked if the Tigers will release him. What do we think about that situation? Javi's hitting 183 with 1 home run. He's been worth -1 F-WAR. He's on a 6-year, $140 million contract with $73 million on the books for the next 3 years. Let's get into what he said, and then we'll talk a little bit about Javier Báez.
Yeah, Robin Shan, let's cut this one up again and hear from Scott Harris directly.
Yeah, that's not a question for the here and now. Right now, we are focused on trying to get the most out of him. He's really an asset for us defensively. We have a lot of pitchers that put the ball on the ground, especially in our bullpen, and we really rely on him to make the plays behind them. He made some really nice plays over the last week or so that helped us. And then on the offensive side of the ball, he's going through some adjustments right now. You know, he's on the other side of 30 right now, but it doesn't make him old. He's still has that fast twitch. He still has that athleticism. We just got to find a way to help him make some adjustments to get back to barreling balls and punishing mistakes like he did in a Cubs uniform, back a few years ago. So we're focused on just trying to help him make adjustments right now, and try to, put him in a position to help us win games.
So that's Scott Harris talking about Javier Báez on MLB Network with Brian Kenny. And the obvious answer there was that's not a question for the here and now when it comes to are the Tigers going to release Javier Báez. That leads me to believe the Tigers have no plans to release Javier Báez this year. I've kind of been standing by that this entire time. Like, I've been asked that question time and time and time again. And it's been, hey, are the Tigers going to cut Javi Báez? Is it going to happen this year? When does he finally go? And I still don't know if it happens this year. And if it doesn't happen by the end of this year, it makes me think that maybe the Tigers are going to run him through another offseason and say, hey, look, we're going to try to make some more changes in the offseason. And maybe that question starts to maybe become a little bit more pressing next spring training before the season starts, if there's somebody else. But here's where I'm at on the Javi Báez train. It's who's going to replace him? Like, who's really better than Javi Báez in this organization? And I'm talking about a player who can play shortstop. I'm not talking about a hitter. I'm talking about somebody who can play shortstop, because Cole Keith cannot play shortstop. Jace Young cannot play shortstop. Okay. Who can play shortstop better than Javier Báez in this organization? And I would even settle for a below average shortstop with a really good bat, but that's not even around either. Like Zach McKinstry, is he really a better option than Javier Báez? Absolutely not. Ryan Kreidler, is he a better option than Javier Báez? Maybe, but probably not, because we haven't seen it so far and he can't stay healthy. Ryan Kreidler cannot stay healthy, and he has not proven that he can hit in the big leagues at all. Like he in the big leagues, there have been times where he looks worse than Javier Báez, and I know it's a small sample, but that's Ryan Kreidler, right? Eddie Leonard, is he really a shortstop? I mean, again, you go look at what he does with the bat, it's a lot of chase. It's Javi-like chase from Eddie Leonard in AAA Toledo, all right? And it's below average defense at shortstop, probably not even a shortstop. Let's just be honest, okay? So who really is a shortstop in this organization if there isn't a true shortstop in AAA Toledo? Unless you're calling up Andrew Navigado or something like that, who started the year in AA Erie. That's not happening either. So it's not Zach McKinstry. It's not Ryan Kreidler. Eddie Leonard is not a shortstop. And also, he has serious chase issues. He does hit the ball hard. He hits the ball really hard, but he chases a ton. So if it's not McKinstry, if it's not Kreidler, if it's not Leonard, who's replacing Javier Báez? 1. And 2, are the Tigers even good enough to replace Javi Báez? That's the other thing, right? If the core isn't built, what's the point? Why cut him loose? If the Tigers believe there is let's throw this number out just to throw it out there. If the Tigers believe there's a 5% chance that Javier Báez is able to turn things around and raise his OPS back up into the 650, 700 range, a 5% chance, and they have no plans of winning and their future is in 2026, 2027, let's just say, what's the point of even cutting him then? You're going to take your 5% chance that the guy you're paying $25 million, then $24 million, then $24 million over the next 3 years after this season. you're going to take your chances on him maybe finding something. If you have no plans to really win, that's why I think a timeline for all this is really important too. It goes back to question one of the big two. So if you're not really trying to win right now, like actively trying, if you are not actively trying to win, there's really no reason to cut Javier Báez, is there? Like, it might feel good for a second, but one, no one's replacing him. And two, you're not winning anything anyway. You're 10.5 games back in the American League Central. So that's where I'm at with Javier Báez. Like, I don't think he gets cut, but at the same time, like, yeah, I mean, it's really bad. Like, look at his OPS. It was, 671 in 2022, 593 in 2023, and right now he's sitting at 456. It's been really bad, but the Tigers are pretty bad too. Let's just be honest here.
I'm just sick and tired of discussing this, to be really honest with you. When we discuss Javier Báez finding it again, here's my answer. There's a really, really great hitter sitting in Florida who's 41 years old. Maybe he can find it again. He goes to his kids' baseball games now and his kids' volleyball games. His name's Miguel Cabrera. Maybe he can find it again and come back. There's about the same chance of Javier Báez finding it again as Miguel Cabrera finding it again. I'm going to tease something that I'm pretty sure you're going to discuss in the next week.
No, just ask me about it straight up. Let's do it.
All right. One thing I love about my partner, Evan Petzold, is one of the great researchers I've ever seen, which is always a fun part of being a baseball writer or analyst. You found some really interesting things this week about Javi. And even if what you find out is correct and he's able to leverage that to improve himself, I'm just wondering if that's enough to make him a productive baseball player. So discuss a little bit about what you found out about the difference in Javier Báez, the hitter with runners on base or runners in scoring position, and Javier Báez, the imitation National League pitcher from 1986 who hits with nobody on base.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was curious, why does Javier Báez perform better with runners in scoring position? That's kind of where I started with all this. And in 2023, he hit .312 with an .829 on-base plus slugging percentage, OPS, with runners in scoring position. In 2024, it's a .390 batting average with a .939 OPS. Javier Báez rakes with runners in scoring position. Like, he has been very, very good for multiple years now. And it caused me to wonder, okay, like, if he's able to do it with runners in scoring position, why is he not able to perform well without runners in scoring position? And if he's doing so well with runners in scoring position, again, like this is not like a super small sample size. Like, when you look at it across 2023 and 2024, I mean, you're talking like 150 plate appearances here. So it's not like a super small sample size. He's been very good with runners in scoring position. He has not been good without runners in scoring position. I wanted to figure out, what was the difference? What is he doing differently at the plate with runners in scoring position compared to without runners in scoring position? We'll look at 2024 because it's a pretty good like resemblance to what we saw last year too. We can go through both, honestly. But in 2023, with runners in scoring position, he was swinging 59% of the time. At 59% of pitches he saw with runners in scoring position in 2023. Without runners in scoring position, 53.6%. 2024, with runners in scoring position, he's swinging 57.5% of the time. Without runners in scoring position, 52.3% of the time. Javier Báez is swinging more often with runners in scoring position. Now, I don't know if that directly correlates to better performance, but it's fascinating that back-to-back years, his swing rate, how often he swings, is up as opposed to without runners in scoring position. So he swings more with runners in scoring position, and it just so happens he's having more success. Well, then I thought, okay, how about his swing rate as a whole? Let's do all pitches across the board. How is Javier Báez performing since 2018? How does the swing rate compare to the OPS? How does it compare to the batting average? Back in 2018, Javier Báez was swinging at 57.9% of pitches. Now, in 2024, 53.4% of pitches. So from pretty much 58% down to 53%. He's swinging considerably less, and it's gone down every single year of his career. He swung fewer and fewer times, especially since he got to Detroit. When he got to Detroit in 2022, 55.8% in 2022, 54.8% in 2023, 53.4% in 2024. The batting average has also dropped in each year. The OPS has also dropped in each year. So when Javier Báez does not swing as often, his performance actually goes down. That has been, from a batting average and OPS standpoint, batting average and OPS have dropped every year that his swing rate, how often he swings, has gone down. And that correlates to what he's doing with runners in scoring position. So when I ask the question, does Javier Báez perform better when he swings more often? The answer to that question is actually yes. So should Javier Báez be swinging more often than he is right now? Maybe.
Well, let's also add a small subtle thing into that data. You know what he's not doing more when he's being less, when he's swinging less? He's not walking more. So patience is not being rewarded with more walks or hitting better pitches. It's just basically making him a worse hitter. So something to think about, something I'm curious why it hasn't been addressed and why a great beat writer is the one figuring this out and not the Tigers analytics department. But
well, Mark, I asked Javi Báez about it. I said, hey man, do you realize that like you're swinging way more often with runners in scoring position than without runners in scoring position? And he said that he had absolutely no idea. And I said, no, like the way that you're swinging with runners in scoring position right now is the way that you were swinging when you were with the Cubs. Like back in 2021, when you were hitting 30 plus homers, like that, you're swinging like as often as you swing now with runners in scoring position is as often as you swung on all pitches in 2021. Like those are comparable things. Like those are two things that align when you look at how often he swings now versus how often he swings back in 2021. So I brought that to him. I asked him about it. He said he had no idea, but he'd be interested to learn a little bit more about the numbers. So we'll see if he digs into it or not and if he makes any changes. But yeah, I mean, for a guy who's completely searching for things, like why not just start swinging more? Why don't you swing like you used to swing when you were with the Cubs? Like, again, go back to the days when you had, you know, a 58% swing rate as opposed to sitting at 53% right now. Maybe it'll work. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a couple weird things about Javi Báez, which just adds to how puzzling everything is. His barrel rate, pretty similar to what it was last year. And, you know, his barrel per plate appearance, not too much different than what it was in 2020. His launch angle, pretty similar. His exit velocity, not terrible. So, you know, his batting average is 235. Last year it was 234. The year before it was 226. The year before it was 237 when he was a much more productive hitter. So it is pretty confounding about why he stinks.
I need to say one more thing, Mark, and it's that Javier Báez, I wonder if, and I know it's going to sound crazy, but I really, and I've wanted this for a long time, have the Tigers tried to change him too much? Like Javier Báez, when he was with the Chicago Cubs, he would chase pitches out of the zone like crazy. He loved to swing at the down and away sliders and swing and miss at them. It's always been a problem in his game. And now he's trying to focus on laying off those pitches. When Javi Báez was good, he was never worried about laying off pitches down and away. He was swinging at everything. Again, to my point about the swing rate, like he was swinging at everything. He was swinging at pitches all around the zone and outside the zone. But he would do damage because he'd, you know, make contact on enough of those pitches outside of the zone. Then he crushed mistakes in the zone. But I wonder if he's thinking too much about trying to have a perfect approach, trying to lay off of pitches outside and trying to, you know, get the perfect pitch inside and wait for his pitch. Javier Báez has never been a hitter who waited for his pitch. Never, ever, ever. When he was good, he never hit like that. His approach, he never had an approach. His approach was swing. And so that's why I wonder if maybe Javier Báez needs to just swing and not worry about laying off down and away sliders and not worrying about trying to read pitches out of the hand as much as he's trying to right now. He's trying to think through all these things about having his perfect approach. He's not drawing more walks. He's still chasing a ton anyway. And sure, the strikeouts are down. They've been down every year since he's been with the Tigers. But again, all the other performance is way down. Like I don't know. I wonder if he needs to just get back to being in swing mode and just kind of say, screw it. Because for a guy who's searching for everything and obviously is going on year 3 of bad performance that continues to get worse, maybe it's time to just swing.
Well, really, really interesting take on the whole thing. Here's what I have to say. I am terrified at the idea that somehow Javi Báez will still be playing shortstop for the Tigers in mid-August based upon how he's playing now, suddenly catch fire for the last 6 weeks of the season and they decide that he's the shortstop for 2025. I'm terrified by that idea. The other thing I have to say about Javier Báez, I'm just tired of talking about it. Truly, I'm just exhausted from it. It's been a terrible 2.5 years. It's not getting better. And it's come time to try to figure out what to do about it. Is he spectacular in the field? He makes spectacular plays. Metrically, not as good as we think he is, but he's been pretty damn good.
He's solid. He's solid.
Okay. At the end of the day, is Javier Báez a core player for the Tigers? No. Is the money going away? Never. Do you want to get better? You need a better shortstop? 100%. Am I tired of discussing this every week? Abso-freaking-lutely. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute. Okay, I think we need to talk about this because it got picked up, got some traction. I'm not a huge fan of it, but Kirk Gibson called in 97-1 to defend the Tigers, called in to Costa and Jansen with Heather. He asked for positivity and patience. So I ask you, Evan Petzold, what the heck was that all about?
Yeah, I'll read you the quote, but I think it's important to at least set the tone for what Kirk Gibson said when he called into the radio. He said, quote, "It seems like there's a negativity on where they are. I think they're in pretty good shape right now. For where we started, and since Scott Harris has come in, I know he's taken some criticism. I mean, everybody has an opinion, but we're sailing along pretty good. A lot of guys have improved. Let's keep the foot on the gas. Let's keep supporting them. It's hard to win. We're not the Yankees. We're the Tigers. We played pretty good down there in Texas." End quote. And that was the first part of his quote. That's all I'm going to read because I think the rest of it just kind of goes into Kirk Gibson talking about Andy Ibanez and Wenzel Perez and Kerry Carpenter and Colt Keith and how it's difficult to learn in the big leagues. But that's generally the course of what he said, right? That's basically what Kirk Gibson said was, let's be more positive because there's too much negativity on where this team is at. And those are some really, really, really interesting comments from a really great baseball player. Surprising comments, actually. I understand that, Kirk Gibson has ties to the Tigers in the way in which he's a special assistant to Tigers president of baseball operations, Scott Harris. He's also a color commentator on Bally Sports Detroit, played 17 years in the big leagues, 12 seasons with the Tigers, won the 1984 World Series, beloved by many, many, many people. Also works for Scott Harris, also works for Bally Sports Detroit. But yeah, I don't know. This is kind of weird, out of nowhere. I don't really understand why he called it. It was kind of fascinating, though. I thought it was interesting that he called the day the Tigers got back over 500. So I don't know if that was a planned, hey, I'm going to wait till they get back over 500, then I'm going to phone the radio station or not. Or if he just was listening to the radio, got fired up and called in. Or if Scott Harris said, hey, Kirk, give him a ring, because I know the Tigers don't really like what the Tigers don't like what's said on talk radio. They do not like it because talk radio is pretty critical, pretty honest, pretty brutal at times, not always positive. So I don't know if Scott nudged, Kirk Gibson or if Tigers PR did. We'll probably never know, but I'm going to stick with maybe Kirk Gibson just wanted to call in and, give him a piece of his mind. What'd you think?
I think, let me just get this straight about Gibby. I love Gibby. We're the same age. I watched everything about him. We were at Michigan State together. We played in the same football conference as high school football players. He is one of the most positive human beings I can actually ever recall. And it was pretty much the mantra of how he was able to attain more rise to the moment plays than almost anybody you could ever remember at clutch times. And God knows that Gibby, if you watched him as a player and watched him develop as a player, had his struggles. So I get where he's coming from. At the same time, I don't think 1982 Kirk Gibson would be saying what he's saying now, but I get it. He's just trying to buy us some time and trying to be positive. And if nothing else, Kirk Gibson is a positive guy. It's how he deals with failure. He deals with failure by trying to be as positive as humanly possible and spread that aura to other people. Do I think it's meaningful? I don't think it means a damn thing. It's just his opinion. It's the same. is Mark Gorash having an opinion that Scott Harris has done absolutely nothing. Just an opinion. And I think the Tigers deserve time. Look, we kind of transition to something else that we're going to close with today, which is should we be giving the Tigers more credit for being 2 games out of the wild card spot? I mean, it kind of ties into what Gibby was saying, right? I mean, the Tigers keep playing 500. They're 2 games out of the wild card spot. I heard Mark Ryan on 97.1 the other day discussing that maybe we're all too, we're too much on the dark side of, believing the Tigers are terrible. And God knows we spent the last 50 minutes discussing that, that aspect of the Tigers. But they're only 2 games out of a wild card spot. I think I personally have said many times on here, if you can play 500 for 3/4 of the season and in 1 quarter of the season go 25-15, you got a great chance to be in. You're 10 over 500. You're an 86-win team. And weirdly, that's kind of how the Tigers have played. So are we too dark about it? Yeah, probably. We're probably a little too negative. At the same time, I think Evan Petzold and Mark Gorash are, 2 pretty shrewd baseball watcher, analyst type of people. We don't look at things purely like fans do. We've been doing this a long time. You have access to things that normal people don't, have insight that normal people don't. It's pretty bad, a lot of things about where this has gone and where it's going compared to our competitors. So are we a little negative? Absolutely. The more you're in it, the tougher it is to see your way out of it. But, do I blame Gibby for taking that perspective? Heck no, it's his opinion. He can have whatever opinion he wants. And I think I say that to a lot of people who respond to me on Twitter. You get an opinion. Doesn't mean it's a good opinion. Doesn't mean it's a right opinion, but you do get one.
For sure. No, everyone gets an opinion. I don't fault Gibby at all for calling in. I just hope he did it on his own doing and it wasn't a nudge from somebody else. But when you mentioned the wild card, I do think it's a really interesting point. Like, yes, the Tigers are 2 games out of the wild card as we sit right now. And you look at what we have, and we got, the New York Yankees are in, the Cleveland Guardians are in, the Seattle Mariners are in the wild card is the Baltimore Orioles, Kansas City Royals, and Minnesota Twins. And then after that, you look at the teams that are still in the hunt as we sit here today. And I kind of look at this large group of teams in the hunt. I look at the Boston Red Sox, the Detroit Tigers, the Toronto Blue Jays, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Texas Rangers, and the Houston Astros. I look at those teams that are outside of the wild card that are still in the hunt. Oakland's nine games back of a wild card spot. The Angels are 9 games back. And then, man, the White Sox, that's a bad team. 17.5 games back of a wild card. That's rough. So I look at those teams, though. Red Sox, Tigers, Blue Jays, Rays, Rangers, and Astros. And when I ask myself, should we be giving the Tigers more credit for being 2 games out? Yes and no, I think. I think, yes, it's good that they haven't plummeted to, Oakland A's territory, LA Angels territory, or Anaheim Angels territory, however you want to describe them. I get that. But at the same time, my question is like, okay, if the Tigers are really going to get in, and let's say that it's going to be Baltimore and Kansas City, you got Minnesota, that's kind of got that last spot in the wild card right now. Are the Tigers really better than the Twins, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, the Rays, the Rangers, or the Astros? And when I look at all of those teams, I say no, they're not better. They are not better than the Texas Rangers on paper. They are not better than the Houston Astros on paper. They are not better than the Tampa Bay Rays on paper. They are not better than the Toronto Blue Jays on paper. I'm not, and again, whatever plays out on the field is what plays out on the field. But the way that I look at it with the numbers and the data, I don't think the Tigers are a better team than the Texas Rangers. And I don't think they're a better team than the Houston Astros, because if we're talking about the Tigers making a wild card spot, we're automatically counting out the Texas Rangers and the Houston Astros. And those teams, I know they're down there in the pack, and I understand that they've had their struggles, but it's early. They are not done yet. Those are 2 teams that can get really hot, and they can rattle off incredible second halves of the season. And we could be talking about a totally different story where the Tigers are maybe buried, by the time that we get halfway through the second half of the season. So if the Tigers are really going to be in that hunt for the wild card, you have to be confident they're better than the Twins, Red Sox, Blue Jays, Rays, Rangers, Astros. I'm not there yet with this group. That's just not where I'm at.
Well, here's what I got to say. On paper, doesn't mean anything. How you play on the field means everything. I'm not sure performance I've seen on the field in the last 7 weeks. Gives me a lot of confidence. But guess what? Playing the Washington Nationals, the next 3, team in many ways that has some similarities to the Tigers. An interesting team, though. I think the Juan Soto trade will potentially go down in history as one of the best trades in Nationals history. You can do a little homework on that if you want to. And then after that, they fly back down to Texas to play Houston in Houston. I'll be very interested to see what goes on there. As we roll along in the season, now in the middle of June, hopefully we start seeing some better performances from literally anybody that's not named Tarek Skubal. Been a weird week, but every week seems to be a weird week of ups and downs. So it's time for us to get out of here. I'd like to remind everybody to rate, share, and subscribe. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we're both a pretty lot of fun on Twitter. You can find us wherever podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and especially at Freep Sports or thefreep.com. We're always in the digital edition. There's some great deals on the newspaper. I suggest you go there and you can read the newspaper every day pretty inexpensively. You can always find us embedded in every Evan Petzold article at freep.com. I'd like to thank our executive producer, Kirk Crawford, who I think is moving to Florida here pretty soon, and I'm going to miss him. I'd also like to thank Free Press editor Nicole Avery Nichols and our producer, the man who always makes us sound professional, Robin Chan. Love to my grandson, the spectacular Braden Michael Gorash, and shout out to the beautiful, lovely Savannah Petzold. Till next week, Evan Petzold, peace.